Greetings to one and all present here. On behalf of the Gandhian Studies Center of Dr. BMN College of Home Science, I, Dr. Chanvi Joshi, take this opportunity to welcome you to SHRI MOHANLAL PATHAK Endowment Lecture Series on Gandhian Principles and Values. We are glad that we could successfully reschedule the session today after the unexpected event last week. We extend our warmest welcome to Dr. Govinden, our distinguished speaker for the day, to Dr. Paromita Chakrabarti, Director of Global Research Center of HR College, to our management members of Seva Mandal Education Society, to the principals of colleges under SMES, to guests from India and abroad, faculty and students. We are especially pleased to have with us members of Dr. Govinden's family from the UK and USA, Mr. Jonathan Jack and Mr. John Barnabas, Reverend Errol Narain from USA, friends from the World Indian Diaspora Conference, Professor Sharma from Indira Gandhi National Tribal University at Amarkantak, Dr. Sachidanandan, eminent Malayalam poet and critic, Professor Ashwani Kumar, Dr. Hansdag, and Dr. S. Anandan from India. Dr. Bhanuben Mahendra Nanavati College of Home Science, Autonomous, is a NAC accredited A+ grade college with a CGPA of 3.69 on 4 and has a UGC status of college with potential for excellence. Dr. BMN College of Home Science has a UGC-sponsored Gandhian Studies Center established in 2013. Let us have a glimpse of some activities conducted at the center. you would have noticed, the Gandhian Studies Center of Dr. B.M.N. College of Home Science aims to preserve and promote Gandhian values through diverse activities for students, staff, and society at large. I would now like to invite Professor Mala Pandurang, Principal, Dr. B.M.N. College of Home Science, to say a few words and introduce our esteemed speaker for today's lecture.
Thank you, Dr. Janvi. I would like to just share a few words about this very unique endowment lecture series that has been initiated, and then go on to introduce Dr. Betty to you. President Dr. Dilipbhai Trivedi is trying to log in, and he will give his welcome address after I have introduced Dr. Betty to you. This lecture series has been initiated by Dr. Bharat Pathak, Honorary Secretary, Seva Mandal Education Society, in the name of his late father, SHRI MOHANLAL PATHAK, to promote Gandhian principles and values, especially among the youth and student community. SHRI MOHANLAL Pathak was a practicing Gandhian who lived a life of simplicity and selfless service. He was born on 14th November 1900 in the Sri Kalidas Karsanji Pathak household. His parents passed away when he was just 10 years old, but he was determined to complete his education and supported himself by giving tuitions. Due to his diligence, he graduated from Sydenham College, Mumbai. He then worked at Rangoon, Mumbai and Calcutta before retiring and moving back to his native home in Chorwad, Gujarat, where he devoted his life to social service. The Mahatma once said that the best way to lose yourself is in the service of others. SHRI Mohanlal Pathak believed in simple living and committed himself to outreach initiatives in terms of education, medical assistance, and financial help to the needy. He was instrumental in guiding the Pathak family to follow the teachings of the Mahatma and to work towards changing not only one's life, but the lives of those around us. It is therefore appropriate that Dr. Bharatbhai Pathak has instituted this lecture series in his name, and the Gandhian Studies Center of Dr. B.M.N. College is indebted to the same. This afternoon, we have the third annual lecture in this series, and it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Devarakshanam Govinden, warmly known as Dr. Betty among friends and also in academic circles. Nelson Mandela once remarked that Gandhi arrived in South Africa as Mohandas, but left as the Mahatma. It is therefore an honor to have an eminent speaker from South Africa who has also been associated with the Phoenix Ashram to address us this afternoon. Dr. Govinden is a South African academic, prolific researcher, author, and poet. She has published on a variety of topics, including education, literature, theology, the visual arts, and interdisciplinary studies. Dr. Govinden is a former Dean of the Faculty of Education at the University of Durban-Westville and is currently a research associate within the Faculty of Education at the University of KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa. She is deeply involved in community activities, and she has a number of publications to her credit, and she has addressed audiences on international platforms. I would especially like to mention two of her books, Representations of Identity and Difference in Selected Writings by South African Indian Women, which has won the prestigious Hindic Curie Award in 2012. And in 2013, she co-edited a book with Professor Kalpana Hiralal titled 1913 Satyagraha and the Legacy of Passive Resistance. I've had the opportunity to interact with Dr. Govinden over email on many occasions, and I have been touched by her graciousness, her humility, and her generosity. Thank you, Dr. Betty, for spontaneously accepting our invitation to speak today on the continued relevance of Gandhian principles in the 21st century.
A very warm welcome to Dr. Dilipbhai Trivedi as well. I would like to invite Dr. Dilip Bhai, President of Seva Mandal Education Society, to say a few words of welcome and release a publication by the center. Dilip Bhai.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir.
On behalf of Seva Mandal Education Society, I would like to welcome Dr. Govinden for this program where one of our secretary, SHRI Pathak, has arranged this endowment for the Mahatma Gandhi Memorial Center. And because of him, this whole program is set. And I would like to point out that in today's mess, what Gandhi would have done is a question always to many of us who are of the older generation. And in that situation, I think Dr. Govinden's lecture will be a very pointing finger at what he could have done, and we would like to hear her version about the same. And on this occasion, I would like to inaugurate the booklet which we have developed, and I will want them to inaugurate the same. Thank you.
Allow me to share a few words on this publication. The world has changed dramatically since Gandhi lived and worked. However, challenges faced by the Mahatma and his responses remain relevant even today. The Gandhian Studies Center has brought forth a collection of essays on the continued relevance of Gandhian values in the 21st century. The publication has contributions from scholars from around the world, including South Africa, Kenya, and Romania. It includes creative writing and academic reflections, thus paving the way for continued dialogue with the Mahatma. And therefore, we were very happy to present the release of our publication, Engaging with the Mahatma. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dilip Bhai Trivedi, for your words of welcome. Thank you, Mala ma'am, for introducing our esteemed speaker for the day. And we invite Dr. Govinden to begin her lecture. Dr. Govinden.
Thank you, Dr. Joshi. The principal, Professor Mala Pandarang, staff and students of Dr. B.M.N. College, affiliated to SNDT University in Mumbai, distinguished guests, and family and friends from India, South Africa, and the rest of the world. Very warm greetings to you all. I should like to begin by lighting a candle as we celebrate Gandhi Jayanti at this particular season. Light symbolizes life and the dispelling of darkness. It is the eternal flame of truth force, of satyagraha that burns in time, in your life and mine, and beyond time. It is the light of truth that burns in this little corner of the planet and to the utmost ends of the cosmos. I'm greatly honored to speak on this occasion. I especially thank Professor Pandarang and Ms. Seleth Mary for making all the arrangements for this presentation. Friends, our connectedness today is deep and vast. India is my ancestral home. At the same time, I claim the continent of Africa, where I was born. And we all claim the four corners of the world, which is our collective planetary home. My maternal grandmother crossed the Indian Ocean and came to South Africa in 1904, when Gandhi was already in the country. And she died on the 13th of January, 1948. Yes, that was 17 days before Gandhi was assassinated on the 30th of January, 1948. I was 4 years old then. So Gandhi has traveled with me in a sense, in a personal way too. It is a special privilege to be speaking from South Africa, which was Gandhi's home for 19 years. I live in the city of Durban, and as you heard already, you'll be pleased to know that Gandhi's home, the Phoenix settlement in Durban, was declared on October the 2nd as a National Heritage Site. It is often said that India gave South Africa Mohandas and South Africa gave India the Mahatma. In his book, Gandhi Before India, Professor Guha, one of India's leading historians, stated that South Africa gave to India its greatest freedom fighter, social reformer, religious pluralist, and prophet. And in turn, India gave Gandhi to the world. Yes, Gandhi in some ways was part of a great relay race for justice, democracy, and peace, receiving the baton from those who went before and handing it over to so many others who followed in his footsteps. Some of our greatest peace activists and freedom fighters in the 20th century have all spoken of the extent to which they were directly influenced by Gandhian values. I will mention here just some of the Nobel Peace Prize winners: Chief Albert Luthuli, Archbishop Tutu, and Nelson Mandela from South Africa, Wangari Maathai in Kenya, Martin Luther King Jr. and Barack Obama in the United States, and the Dalai Lama from Tibet, India. I'm sure some of you may be thinking as I'm speaking, if Gandhi was so influential, why then are statues of him being torn down? The criticisms against Gandhi are due to a very selective rendering of his life and to some of the earlier statements that he made, and a poor understanding of the context of the times in which he lived. I've written about this elsewhere if you would like to read. But the criticisms do not take into consideration that Gandhi changed over time. But if we are to look closely at Gandhi, his life and his teaching and his example, and weigh all aspects, we will indeed appreciate his unique influence over a century and a half to this day. Yes, 151 years after his birth, drawing from Gandhi's life and example. As offered in my introductory outline, the values that Gandhi both preached and practiced may be summed up in the word hospitality. Hospitality is more than offering someone a cup of tea or a meal, although it might certainly include that. It is offering the other a hospitality of the heart. This is a just hospitality, or hospitality of justice, of showing a welcome that values the other. It is a hospitality that implicitly and explicitly challenges the injustice and oppression that emerges from human prejudice. This hospitality, as Tagore urged in Gitanjali, strikes at the root of penury or poverty in our hearts. Incidentally, that prayer from Tagore was one of Gandhi's favorites. For Gandhi, hospitality is a largesse of spirit that is manifest in every sphere of our lives, from the deeply personal to the broadly public. This is what we mean when we greet one another with the namaste. The God in me greets the God in you. We need to remember that in order to create a human community, we are exhorted to practice all the Gandhian values: Satyagraha, Savodhya, Hind Swaraj, and Swadeshi. All of these are in the service and practice of ahimsa, or non-violence, or love. For Gandhi, you could not have one without the other. They are all links in the chain of hospitality. Indeed, with Gandhi, there is unity of thought and action. For Gandhi, ideas and critical thinking are very important. Experiences give birth to ideas. Ideas give birth to action. And action gives momentum, hands and feet, to changing the world. As the soul-stirring opera Satyagraha, composed by Philip Glass, the British composer, offers, with an idea, Gandhi formed and founded a movement. With a movement, he created a nation. With a nation, he changed the course of history. It is in the spirit of these Gandhian values that I wish to look at 3 areas where Gandhi's impact and influence is especially imperative at the present time. Firstly, creating a human community in the sphere of religion. Gandhi is more relevant today than ever before in the field of religion, in interfaith relations. Yes, my sisters and brothers, when the religions of the world unite, we will be able to build a common humanity. We see at the present time 2 scenarios. On the one hand, there's increasing interfaith tension and polarization. Some of the worst crises in history and indeed in the 20th century were undergirded by religious animosities, and this tragic state of affairs has not abated in the present time. We see growing fundamentalisms and sectarianisms in all our different faith traditions. On the other hand, we have wonderful examples of hospitality. In so many places, there is unbelievable mutual trust and remarkable interfaith cooperation. Karen Armstrong, the British writer of the Catholic background and who has written extensively on interfaith relations, has stated, if your understanding of God made you kinder, more empathetic, and impelled you to express sympathy in concrete acts of loving kindness, that is good theology. Yes, our best interfaith exponents draw from the world of their own faiths to preach the religion of love. It was the Dalai Lama who said directly and quite simply, kindness is the only religion. Archbishop Tutu has pleaded that we should not create God in our own image. And one of my favorite interfaith exponents, Dr. Navid Kamani, a German-Iranian writer and Islamic scholar, says pointedly, God is beautiful. Similarly, Gandhi was deeply religious, and his life and principles came from a deep understanding of the essence of Hinduism, from being rooted in the Hindu faith. It was the Dalai Lama, who came from another faith tradition, who appreciated this. When he accepted the Nobel Peace Prize in 1989, the Dalai Lama observed that Gandhi drew from a 3,000-year-old Hindu tradition of ahimsa and karuna, of compassion. Gandhi believed in the equality and fellowship of all faiths. Of religion, Gandhi said, like the bee gathering honey from different flowers, the wise person accepts the essence of the different scriptures. Speaking as a Christian, hospitality is the cornerstone of the Christian faith, where showing love to our neighbor is a cardinal commandment. And we are constantly reminded that every person we deem a stranger or the other is our neighbor. Gandhi said that my life is my message. And in South Africa, what we deeply appreciated is Gandhi's cooperation with people of different faiths. Here, I would like to give you one example that is particularly close to me and that you might not know. It is related to my church, St. Aidan's Anglican Church in Durban. The founder of St. Aidan's Mission, the Reverend Dr. Lancelot Booth, an English medical missionary, came to South Africa and founded St. Aidan's Mission in 1883. This mission would later develop into a hospital, into schools, and a church. Gandhi arrived in Durban in 1893, and he and Reverend Booth became close friends. And when Reverend Booth started a small street clinic in the city, Gandhi used to leave his law practice to go to assist at the clinic during his lunch breaks. This small clinic grew into a large hospital in the city, and my church is right next to it and is part of this very mission today. Reverend Errol Narain, who is joining us from Chicago and is from South Africa, will be able to tell you about this history as well. Gandhi actually writes at length about Reverend Lancelot Booth in his autobiography, My Story of Experiments with Truth, and you can read about it there. Then there are remarkable interfaith cooperation during the early Satyagraha campaigns and the freedom struggle in South Africa to this day. I must mention here the role of Ela Gandhi, the daughter of Maninal Gandhi and granddaughter of Mahatma Gandhi in this context. Ela Gandhi is exemplary in her openness to all faiths. She personally and through the Gandhi Development Trust, which she coordinates, practices interfaith cooperation across the religious spectrum. Another sterling example in Durban is the work of the Dennis Hurley Center, named after one of the Catholic archbishops in the city, where people of different faiths work together among refugees, those from other countries, the poor and the homeless. My second point deals with crossing domestic borders as we create a common humanity. To build a common humanity, we especially need to build bridges across the nations of the world and create solidarity for the ongoing struggle for freedom, justice, and peace in our time globally. Gandhi was a man of high ideals and saw this as the ultimate goal of the struggle for self-rule or Hind Swaraj or national liberation. Although Gandhi fought for India's independence from British rule, he was not a supporter of narrow nationalism. Further, Gandhi had a deeper, more holistic and integrated, if not unusual, understanding of self-rule that went beyond just political self-rule for the nation. Firstly, self-rule inside the nation. Gandhi began with what happened inside the country first. Gandhi wanted to see a united India under an all-embracing Mother India. Gandhi saw self-rule for the nation as a whole as a fine network of interrelated aspects: the individual, the family, the communal groupings, the village, the country as a whole, all working in concert, in harmony and with mutual support. Gandhi wanted then each individual to take responsibility, to understand and practice self-rule and self-discipline personally. This is the care of the self, physically, ethically, morally, and spiritually. Then Gandhi saw self-rule or self-reliance at all levels and rungs of society, beginning at the local level. This was not to happen from the top down, self-rule, but rather from the bottom up. This is something we need to understand in our democracies. In fact, Gandhi spoke of the tyranny of the majority in Hind Swaraj. And Ambedkar himself, who was the architect of the Indian Constitution, spoke of the risk of democracy. In his Nobel lecture, the Dalai Lama summed it up simply when he urged the practice of hospitality to oneself, to one's neighbor, and to the world. Gandhi wanted a nation where there was no hierarchy, where, for example, the villages were just as important as the cities, if not more important, and where there was a special valuing of the indigenous, the tribal, and the communal. Gandhi's concept of Swadeshi, the valuing of the local, was at the heart of Hind Swaraj. Swadeshi and Hind Swaraj were two sides of the same coin. This is why, for example, the spinning wheel became the center of Gandhi's thought and action. He urged Indians to use their hands and spin their own cloth while boycotting British textiles. Vandana Shiva, one of our great contemporary Gandhians, says, in this period of the end of the world, how do we sow the seeds of a possible world? The first, every person should recognize that working with their hands and their hearts and their minds and being interconnected is the highest evolution of our species. Working with our hands is not a degradation, it is our real humanity. This is something you at Dr. BMN College understand well and practice, and especially as it pertains to women. It is important to remember that a great deal of the work women do is done by hand. It is necessary to respect the kind of manual labor that so many women perform and not undervalue it. This is true in our homes and in our communities and in the nation and the world at large. We cannot speak of Savodia, the welfare of all, if women, for example, are undermined, abused, and experience violence in different forms. Indeed, it is from the center of the spinning wheel, from the charka, that we spin. Spin cloth, spin sustenance, spin justice, spin equality, spin peace, spin freedom, spin prayers, spin poetry, spin love. It is not surprising that the spinning wheel became the symbol of Indian independence. And it is when individuals, families, communities, villages, and the nation as the whole are self-reliant, valued and interdependent in various ways, that self-rule eradicates poverty in its different forms, that the nation becomes a vast network of equality, interdependence, and mutuality. This is the radical equality that Gandhi aimed for. And then we have unity beyond the nation as we break down our domestic borders. Gandhi wanted to live in a world where there was harmony across our national differences. In this sense, Gandhi's desire for the world was similar to Tagore's, who wrote in the Gitanjali the following prayer: where the world has not been broken up into fragments by narrow domestic walls, into that haven of freedom, my Father, let my country awake. It is by breaking down narrow domestic walls, both within the nation and beyond, that we create a commonwealth of nations in the true sense of the term. It was for this reason that Gandhi spoke of civilization rather than nation. Gandhi said our ability to reach unity in diversity will be the beauty and the test of our civilization. Our ultimate hope and prayer is for the unity of the entire world, a unity that crosses borders, borders that we have created within, borders of caste, creed, language, and religion, borders of gender and sexual orientation, borders of race, that we must also fight and still fight the scourge of racism. And that is why the Black Lives Matter movement is important in our time. Borders against and based on nationality, borders between East and West, North and South, borders between what has been termed the First World and the Third World. We have separated the world into powerful countries versus the weak countries, rich and poor, developed and underdeveloped. We have many hurdles to overcome in building a common world, a common humanity. I know we have to be pragmatic, but it is the narrow, chauvinistic, exclusionary understanding of nationalism that has created detention camps, refugees, that has put the lives of the children of the world in jeopardy. Daily, we see examples on our television screens of these humanitarian crises in different places. The challenge of COVID-19 has reminded us more starkly of the need to create one human community. Although we have been forced to stay apart from one another, from the domestic to the global, we have also been reminded by the pandemic more directly than ever that we are one world. As Bob Marley sings, one love, one heart. Let's get together and be all right. The pandemic has brought home to us starkly the differences and disparities within nations and between nations, between rich and poor. We realize the futility of war and violence against one another when we are fighting a greater war, a war against a global pandemic. We realize that we are all united in our vulnerability. The pandemic is teaching us that life cannot be normal, that compassion and the spirit of hospitality are needed in this great hour of need in our world. COVID-19 has reminded us that the Gandhian value of Savoia, the welfare of all, from the single individual across each nation to the entire world, is more important now to create a common humanity. We may have different local realities, different personal circumstances, but we all need a common world of justice and peace and love and healing and hope. And thirdly, and this is my last point, hospitality towards the planet. Gandhi was deeply concerned about hospitality to the planet, our earthly home. 100 years ago, climate change or global warming was not a serious challenge, but it certainly is at the present time. We need to appreciate that if aspects of Gandhi's example and teaching were heeded, we would not be in the crisis we face today. Gandhi's personal lifestyle and his core values showed an intuitive understanding of preserving the environment. Gandhi's stress on spinning, referred to already, for example, showed his fear of excessive mechanization and the impact of industrialization. Gandhi was opposed to the plundering of the environment and its pollution, which is based to some extent, we must admit, on excessive consumerism. As the well-known quote of Gandhi reminds us, the planet has enough for our need, but not for our greed. Gandhi spoke against the exploitation of the world's resources to create wealth for the few against sufficiency for all. How do we show hospitality to the planet? How do we show kindness to the environment? If ever we need to be aware of our place in the cosmos, our responsibility on the planetary scale, it is now. Dr. Kumi Naidoo, one of our great South African political activists and former director of Greenpeace, is a great follower of Gandhi and a leader in civil disobedience in our time. He has been working tirelessly for the protection of the planet, from the Arctic to the Antarctic. He has reiterated Gandhi's words, "Be the change you want to see." As Kumi Naidoo says, the power of civil disobedience as a strategy lies in its moral authority. The work of Wangari Maathai, mentioned already, is also important in this respect, and so many groups in India who value the trees and who are planting trees and saving the environment. We need to understand that we are deeply connected with the human and the non-human world, and that we share the planet with the animal and plant world. This is what Savordhya in its deepest and broadest sense means. Savordhya means the welfare of all. This refers to the welfare of the individual and the collective, the nation and the world, the human and the non-human. If we look at our world, we would be sad to see the destruction of our forests, our rivers, our land, our fish, our animals. How do we make the world a habitable place for human and non-human existence? How do we make the world a habitable place for our children and our grandchildren who are the future? For Gandhi, creating a world of love, peace, and justice includes a respect and reverence for creation in all its aspects, both human and non-human. This is the world we inhabit, and we are called to be good stewards and carers of the planet, which is our collective home and which we share with different forms of life. When such hospitality, Savordhya, extends to the self, to people in our families, neighborhoods, cities, and the world beyond, when Savordhya extends to people of different religions, when Savordhya or hospitality is practiced inside the nation and beyond to other nations, and when Savordhya hospitality extends to the non-human world, we will be able to build a common humanity. In conclusion, I should like to end with a few poems I have composed. These are called my Gandhi poems, and they refer in many ways to the themes that I've already touched on. The first poem, Universal. From your womb, you longed for peace among all peoples of faith, to see hatred abate and earthly kingdom cease. You implored against zealots. For truth and love, you gave your body to be burned. Out of the ashes, your spirit quickens, refusing to die. Savordhya. Unto this last, I give the same as unto the first. He who worked from the first hour is equal to he who worked from the 11th. Both meet in the dignity of work and in the dignity of pay. The gift of bread for all is the bequest of peace for the world. Song of the Atman, for the unity of the universe. From blades of grass to birds tired in flight, I seek eternal truths. In this great interweaving is born freedom of the self and the bliss of being. One soul in a many-bodied universe. Song of Ascents. It is not in erudite thoughts, but in the sinews of a spinning wheel. Serving my neighbor, I see truth's cause and freedom's gain. In widow's sighs, its liturgy, and widow's tears, an altar for the sacrament of love. Hind Swaraj. We inherit the cosmos, sky, sea, and hallowed earth to hold in sacred trust. It is not in the state machine, but in self-rule that true Swaraj is found. Not in the gilded wealth of hoard houses, but in the scattering of grain on tilled soil. You and I are stewards of creation, threaded through with love. We find our calling in the dignity of nature and the manifold of work. The nurture of the planet. From prison houses degraded and coarsened, the human soul arises to seek justice without faltering, refusing the sacrilege of silence. Stave off the anarchy loosened on the world, post blood on the lintels, and mark the foreheads for peace. Nurture a planet for bounty and bread. And the last poem, as you ply the thread on the spinning wheel, wrapped in contemplation, hands and minds in placable unison, you come to a hospitality of the heart towards yourself and your neighbor. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Betty, for a very enlightening lecture. And you have ignited the light in all our hearts and not just in the lamp next to you. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
I would like to invite Dr. Paromita Chakrabarti from Global Research Initiatives, HR College of Commerce and Economics, for her response to the address. Dr.
Thank you very much to everyone. I think there's some problem with my video. It's constantly, going off. But anyway, I want to thank Dr. Govinden for an exceptionally insightful and enlightening lecture on different aspects of Gandhian values. And I want to, in my response, I think highlight a few things which stand out as the most important takeaways that we can think about or after we are finished with today's session. I would like to begin with the quote you shared with us, that light is truth that dispels darkness. We indeed are living in very dark times, particularly with the pandemic. We know what it has done to most people in the world. But we also know that the whole world is our home, and it is the place where the human community lives. I am most impressed by your take on Gandhian core values in terms of 5 aspects that I could put down together. And they are, I think, the first idea that I think is important for us to remember and keep alight is the idea of hospitality. We indeed have to create a human community. Although we are all together, we still are not a community. We are deeply divided. So I think hospitality as one of the core Gandhian values has to be practiced very, very rigorously to mitigate the polarization that we see today in this world. Because concrete acts of loving and kindness are our only hope, as you rightly said. And kindness is certainly our only religion. Particularly ahimsa and karuna, which you talked about. Non-violence and compassion can see us through. Nothing else, I guess, can. Secondly, you also touched upon the idea of interconnectedness of the body, mind, and spirit, as well as the community. How work needs to be worshipped in terms of giving dignity to the worker. So working with your own hands, manual labor, women's work have been always relegated as something not important, something not dignified, something that does not get paid. So I think we want to take that from your talk, that women's work, poor peasants who are working with the soil, toiling under the sun, craftspeople who make things. These are people who are changing our world, and they have to be respected. Their work needs to be, made dignified once again. Third important aspect that you touched on is self-reliance, the idea of self-reliance as a robust quality that can empower all of us. Particularly in the sense that when we have the world divided in so many ways, and you have the powerful versus the powerless, empowerment is a really important phrase that needs to be harnessed. And yes, self-reliance can bring us to that, to empowerment. So breaking down the narrow walls of the domestic, as you quoted Tagore, a beautiful, beautiful line. Breaking down the narrow walls of the domestic and lighting up, and going out in the world, which is free, crossing borders of caste, religion, race, class, nationality, breaking down the narrow, exclusionary, masochistic, parochial nationalism that is that is stifling us. I think those were wonderful, ways in which we can imbibe Gandhi in our lives. And finally, I think what I was most impressed by is to bring it all to a close, the idea of an ecological impulse. Yes, the pandemic has upended our world. Things are never going to be same again. But we need to be hospitable, not just to ourselves, but also to the planet. And we have seen that in Gandhi, we see that ecological impulse. We see that in Tagore. Nature, things growing, nurturing, all of these come together. The aspect of love and kindness, not just to people, but also to all forms of life around us, is so important. So I think I would also want to, think of Bob Marley at the end and say only love can save us. Only the whole world can come together to save us out of the darkness that we are in today. And your lecture on Gandhian core values certainly has thrown a lot of light on so many areas that were unknown and dark to us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Paramita, for such a nice response. And I'm sure Dr. Paramita has echoed almost the thoughts that all of us have been having. So thank you, Dr. Betty. Thank you, Dr. Paramita. And we would like to hear responses and feedback from all our participants. We are posting a link for the feedback in both Zoom Live as well as the YouTube channel. Please do share your valuable feedback with us. And as we are moving towards the end of the session, I invite Mrs. Vidya Subramanian from Dr. BMN College of Home Science to give a vote of thanks. Vidya ma'am.
Thank you, Janvi. Good evening, Honorable Speaker, management members of the Seva Mandal Education Society, principals of all constituent colleges under the Seva Mandal, our teaching and non-teaching staff, students, and to all those who have connected with us online. I, Mrs. Vidya Subramanian, member of the Gandhian Studies Center, am indeed privileged to propose a vote of thanks on the occasion of the third Mohanlal Pathak Endowment Lecture Series. On behalf of the UGC recognized Gandhian Studies Center of BMN College of Home Science Autonomous, I would like to thank our Honorable Speaker, Dr. Devarakshanam Govinden, for such a heart-touching talk on being a human community. Thanks a lot, ma'am. I thank Dr. Bharat Pathak, Honorary Secretary, Seva Mandal Education Society, and his family for instituting this endowment series in memory of his father, late father, and joining us today. I thank Global Research Initiatives. Hello. I thank Dr. Bharat Pathak. I thank Global Research Initiatives of HR College of Commerce and Economics, headed by Dr. Paramita Chakraborty and a team to be with us on this event. I thank the management members, the principals of the constituent colleges, teaching and non-teaching staff who have joined us today on this occasion. Students and people from institutions in India and abroad have joined us online today to participate in this function. This itself is a huge success for us. Our heartfelt thanks to each one of you. I would like to thank Mr. Nitin Pawar, Ms. Rikisha Maniat, teaching staff from the Department of Computer Applications for their technical help rendered for a glitch-free online session. I would like to finally thank the organizing team, student volunteers of the Gandhian Studies Center, helmed by our dear principal, Professor Mala Pandurang, for successfully guiding us and helping us put together this program today. Thanks a lot, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mrs. Vidya. With this, we come to a formal close of talk. But Dr. Betty, this was a really, really very, very relevant talk that you gave. And I do hope that you will allow us to share your script.
Yeah. I will send you the script. I'm sorry we were disconnected for a while, but I'll send you the script.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I do hope that we can keep in touch.
We will keep in touch. Thank you.
And have further sessions such as this.
All right. Okay. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.